Oh, yeah. So just on the Anon piece, which is interesting. And when I was
Oh,
talking to somebody randomly at this party, they were like, we shared telegrams, and I used my Anon because that's on my Telegram. And he was like, "Oh, you're such and such." And I was like, "Yeah."
okay.
And like I recognized that it was much the perception of that was much different than the perception of me, like as I am. And
Mm,
what I found is that like in certain ways, like I can't be discriminated against as an anon because I don't have a technical computer science background, but like
mm,
I'm learning this as I go. But as an anon, nobody knows what my background is. So they just
yeah.
evaluate me based off the merits of the argument. They don't actually evaluate it based off of like any kind of discriminatory, like arbitrary, I don't know, like measures of legitimacy,
Yeah.
if you want to call them that. So that's kind of why I've decided to like choose that path and keep them separate. I mean, at some point, like if one of the other gets big enough, like I'm sure it will come up, and I'm sure I'll have to deal with it at some point.
Hello, barbarians, and welcome to the 20th episode of the LLB podcast. Today we have a continuing story in the crypto space. As everyone knows, there's a lot of drama going on from the past week. On Friday, I already did a recording on the FTX collapse. And as that was going on, a lot has happened already, from the CEO having to step down to, I think there was rumors yesterday that FTX was hacked, and it seems to be confirmed now. So I guess we'll get into that later. But before we begin, we'll get a short introduction from our guest, Patrick Ambrus, or formerly as I know, Pat. Together, Pat and I have a long, long history together. Actually, Pat was my first business partner ever back in university when we were in the hedge fund space. So this is a very exciting episode to kind of get back together, chop it up again. And Pat has gone through a lot of different things with his career, since our time at hedge funds, universities, to prop trading, to working in traditional retail space, to joining Amazon, and now becoming a crypto researcher. So Pat, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you related to crypto?
Sure. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me. I would say um, primarily I focus on doing protocol research, trying to understand from first principles the nuances of the technology, and then from there be able to, I'd say, make some like broader distinctions and classifications about ideas. Uh, and Most recently, I've been doing some research with Ernst & Young. My research has primarily focused on MEV, which you might know, minor extractable value or maximal extractable value. Also, some risk frameworks on different DeFi tokens. And in addition to that, some other things on scalability and rollups and ZK proofs and things like this.
You're going to have to help break some of those terms down. So I am not a crypto native, so I'm still trying to figure a lot of stuff out. So maybe you could help explain some of those concepts.
Yeah, sure. So I guess maybe a little bit more background. When I initially got interested in crypto was post March 2020, when we had COVID lockdowns and the Fed bailout. And having spent some time in markets, I was very aware of the after effects of quantitative easing and the opportunity to front run it, basically, and position correctly. And so I'd recently just been laid off from one of my jobs, and I had some more time on my hands. And so, like, I really dug into Bitcoin, started to understand the technology, and then got a little bit bored of Bitcoin after a couple months, and started to learn about Ethereum. And then in 2021, got very active doing DeFi on chain, and then very active doing crop chain stuff, and then NFTs and whatnot. And I would say that's my story. I've done transactions on, I don't know, countless, 25 plus chains, whatever is out there. I've used pretty much every kind of DeFi protocol that there is. It doesn't make me special. There's a lot of degens that have done that. but it's given me a perspective on the tech from a user's perspective, but then also like from a high level, going through the source code, going through the specifications, the white papers, research posts, things like this. Some of it I don't understand at first, but building some deeper, just layering out over time, and also talking to more people and learning, what's up to that and these problems and things in the space. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay. No, I mean, I think that's probably good enough. I mean, if I keep asking too much, we'll probably go in a deep, dark rabbit hole and not come up. So, let's talk about what is currently happening then. So, what is your take on what has unfolded in the past week? And I know this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, like everyone's talking about. And on my last session, I have a pretty good idea of what led up to the events from the past 3 months ago. But I mean, I like to hear a different perspective, maybe from different angles, or maybe some deeper insights, right? So, as we know, FTX was the third largest exchange in the world. From my understanding, this was like a result of some type of systemic contagion from events unfolding from Luna to Celsius to all these I don't know what you call them, I guess Luna is a coin, and then Celsius was a crypto company of sorts, right? But they all had exposures of each other's currencies, a lot of illiquid assets on each other's balance sheets, and then from my understanding, that is what that was probably the inherent risk that was ongoing. It only kind of just manifested from people doing reporting and investigation, and then finally, as usual, Twitter kind of was the impetus, from my understanding, of what blew up everything, from one tweet to the second tweet to everyone doing business on Twitter now for some reason in the crypto space. So I don't know, what is your take on what happened with FTX? And I remember, like, when I first asked you about it last week, you had some pretty good insights, and maybe you could reiterate some of your thoughts about people holding assets on exchanges and the nature of that. So, but your take, and then maybe your what you think about that. Yeah.
So like at a really high level, I think it's just very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious that there was fraud here, and I think a lot of people will try to dumb it down or water it down over time.
Yeah.
But clearly, customer deposits were being used for leveraged activities, and as a result of this, customers lost funds or are actively losing funds. It's unclear if, what portion of funds will be recovered, if anything, ultimately. Yeah. But this is almost like an iteration on MF Global and John Corzine. So, I mean, basically, the crux of it comes down to is, and we can get into the background of all this other stuff and like also a bigger picture later. But what it comes down to is that, SBF started this hedge fund, Alameda Research. They did a lot of trading, on-chain, off-chain, did a lot of market making. But in order for them to grow, they needed basically under collateralized loans. And in crypto, everything on chain is over collateralized, with the exception of like a couple protocols, which in my opinion are extremely questionable, i.e. Maple Finance. But everything else is over collateralized. So if you're going to borrow, $50 on chain, you have to post a minimum collateral of, let's say, I don't know, $100, depending on, who you're borrowing from and what the terms are, what contract you're using, et cetera. So anyway, they were soliciting people in 2019 saying, hey, we can give you 15-20%, APR, just loan us, $100 million or loan us $20 million, whatever it is. And people were laughing at them and saying no. And this was, if you recall, on the back of like a really bad 2018 for crypto. So like in 2019, people still weren't back on the crypto bandwagon. So what did they do? They decided to print, or they decided to create FTX. And so FTX became this exchange, and then Alameda now would market make for FTX. And so how would this get financed? Well, FTX would just create this FTT token, give a large allocation to Alameda, make the token go up in value, and allow FTT to be posted at FTX as collateral and then FTX basically is then able to take any kind of user deposits that they want and give them to Alameda to go do DeFi games or market make on OTC, right? That's really the crux of the problem. And it's still unclear where and how they lost all of their money and what their exposure was. My theory, based off of what we know today, is that they likely got taken out during the Terra Luna collapse, and FTX bailed out Alameda rather than just saying, you know what, let's take the pain and let's deal with this. They said no, and they showed this very strong position, and SBF came out looking like, the media labeled him as like JP Morgan or something like this, right? Like as a savior.
That's just the problem when people start doing that, right? Very Theranos-like.
100%. So, and then basically it came to a head last week because people have observed SBF lobbying U.S. Congress people, and there's this bill, the DCCPA, that I'm sure you're aware of, that has some stringent regulation for DeFi protocols and also stablecoin issuers. And the regulation is really loose in terms of like the verbiage, and so like anything can be inserted in there pretty much. And SBF is really pushing and advocating for this, and people in the community are saying, what the fuck are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. This is not our values.
Yeah.
And so he had a very public debate with a long-term OG in the space named Eric Voorhees. He's been very involved in the Bitcoin, Ethereum space, even Thorchain, etc. He had a very public debate, and Voorhees basically just owned him in the debate. And so people got really upset that SBF got owned in the debate and then didn't acknowledge like that he was wrong about these principles. After that, somebody leaked Alameda's balance sheet, and people saw Alameda's balance sheet really just had a bunch of shit coins on there, mainly FTT. And so people realized, oh my God, Alameda doesn't have any cash. They're probably insolvent. And then so basically people started to sell FTT immediately. And then people started to withdraw from FTX. That's like smart money was like, okay, I'm pulling off of FTX now. And then all the shenanigans started with freezing withdrawals and, up to last night when, yes, like a rogue employee did hack some funds, swap some staked ETH for ETH, swap some USDT for DAI because DAI can't be censored. So like thinking that they're going to get away with it.
What's the rumor on which employee this is? I mean, of course, it's rumor though.
I can get it for you.
Oh no, it's not that important.
I can get it for you. It was identified because of the employee's GitHub commits. Like the employee for the entire year didn't commit to GitHub, and then like all last week, all of a sudden out of the blue is committing to GitHub like crazy.
That's all. That's good. That is crazy. So are these GitHub commits? These are what internal GitHub company only can see, or these are not like anything public, right?
No, they were public. You could see them. Whatever he was building.
Is this because of the nature of blockchain? So, or why is GitHub commits public in this sense?
Well, because people use GitHub to like build out. I'm gonna butcher this because obviously I'm not a developer, right? But like people use GitHub to upload and store their code so it can be forked, right? And it can be worked on by other people. And so you have this repository and you store your basically your active code in there. And usually, like, if you're going to do something nefarious, you probably wouldn't want to upload it to GitHub. But some people just don't like think about things like this, and they just
maybe I don't understand how GitHub is used in the crypto space, because I mean typically it's just internal code and your team will see all the commits. So maybe it was someone on the team who leaked it out that they saw all these commits going live and identified the employee maybe. So but okay, I was just joking that maybe it was just SBF. He's going to take some money and run, and it's just some fake employee profile. I mean, that guy is in so much trouble now. Okay, but let's go back to the story. I think there's two very interesting lines that you brought up. The first line is I'm very curious about is the structure of Alameda and FTX? Because I think you put it very succinctly, which I haven't read anywhere like that, like breaking it down in that kind of way. And then secondly is the regulation piece, which it seems like from what you're telling me, SBF is the one who kind of is the impetus of maybe regulation to come, and like the fallout just makes this way worse now because you went to regulators and now you're in the crosshairs and maybe even screwed over some regulators potentially if they were somehow involved. And as we know, politicians always love getting in on early trades whenever they can. So can help me understand, like, how was this structured and not flagged? You know, when Alameda is market making for FTX, and like, shouldn't there be some understanding of what's on the balance sheet, or where's the accountability mechanism? Like, why was this allowed to be structured this way early on and grow so big? It just doesn't make sense to me. Because why was that bad to begin with? I mean, because it technically seems like it was happening and it was working fine. Like, I guess the counter way to think about this is like, how could they structured it in such a way that, you know, they did it in that same way, but it was in a positive way or in a way that made more sense, right? So there's like, I don't know, maybe help me understand the nuance of that relationship.
Well, like, the problem you have is that they were pitched as separate entities, but everybody knew that they were the same entity, and everybody knew that SBF was really just running Alameda. He had this guy named Sam Trabucco in charge for some time. Trabucco actually resigned about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, which is interesting in retrospect.
Yeah, retrospect, obviously.
Yeah. But like, ultimately, if you have an exchange, right, and then you also have a market maker, and the market maker is trading against your customers, that's not really great, right? Because then your customers are facing adverse selection from you, not just like some rando market maker that you hire.
Correct.
Like,
yeah, there's huge conflict of interest.
But
I mean, this happens in the fiat modern financial system too, right? And like houses always front run. They know the books of the customers. There is some incest between, not directly legally, and also not as bad as Alameda and probably FTX, but like those relationships, it's a circle. And I think that's the whole thing with TradFi, traditional finance, right? Is that's like the boys club, and then DeFi, DeFi and crypto is supposed to be the opposite of that, right? So it almost seems like a replication of what happened. And the fact that he also went to approach regulation is like just the most ultimate TradFi move too, right? So it's like, it's just so what was inherently, like, I still don't understand. I mean, I need to go back and probably listen to what you said, but like, the way they structured it, what was the biggest problem in it?
So the biggest problem in it is it's a problem that is inherent in crypto because of you have an ability to issue or create a token. And so FTX accepted their own token, FTT, as collateral for loans, for under-collateralized loans, not over-collateralized loans. And even if they were over-collateralized loans, because like that stuff is still coming out, it doesn't even really matter because Alameda got the FTT tokens at the issuance for cents on the dollar, like 10 cents a token.
But the collateralization for this case, FTT, right, would be the value of the exchange, no, right? Because so say if you collect FTT tokens, you get discounts, people keep using it, inherently that's the use case where there should be value in it. And then, like, I mean, it's shitty that it went to Alameda, but shouldn't those coins hold some kind of value? Or was it because prop trading was pumping up the price?
So like initially at the outset, FTX, they created these FTT tokens, right? And so Alameda by proxy got a huge allocation of them, which is fine. Like the distribution doesn't really matter so much.
Okay.
It just matters that FTX allowed FTT to then be used as collateral to borrow legitimate stablecoins from them. So they took a shit currency that they just made up out of the blue and let Alameda use it as collateral for real money.
Okay.
And ultimately, people are saying like, well, where did the deposits go? But if they had these deals with Alameda, where Alameda had, stable coins and real assets, and then was going and market making with them, and obviously not doing as good a job as people thought they were, you have a problem. You then become insolvent. And as the price of FTT collapsed, basically like the value of the assets on their balance sheet just, they skyrocketed.
Yeah.
It's actually not that different from the Luna UST collapse, or even that different from like the Ponzi's earlier in January, like Olympus DAO and Wonderland, and things like this. Like it comes back to the same thing, and that is that like there is no free lunch. So if you just create a token, like if it doesn't have any cash flow attached to it, like you can't assume that it's going to be valuable. And even if it does have a cash flow attached to it, it doesn't mean it's going to be valuable. It has no bearing on like being able to acquire assets in bankruptcy as a creditor. As a token holder, you just get wiped out, right? It's not a security.
Yeah. Well, because in this case, it was because it's tied to the exchange and the deposits, which if those are all run, then there is no value, right? So there was no mechanism to prevent a run, right? So that was one of the topics that I kind of was asking on Friday to my friends. I couldn't get a clear answer. Like, if we look at modern fiat and how banks are, regulated, and how the banking system is created with fractional reserves, and then the central bank puts all the rules on, right? Of course, the biggest number one factor of preventing bank runs is just fiat. People will just believe in your institution of government, right? So obviously that's something that's just clearly still missing in the crypto space. But then secondly, if there is some type of run or liquidity shock, right, the central bank steps in and then provides those short-term loans to alleviate that pressure, right? So people can then withdraw, and it's the government essentially. It's the Federal Reserve, some form of the government that's kind of guaranteeing this and allows for that liquidity. And of course, that's managed through interest rates later on, right? Why is if all these finance bros are going to the space, why is this not something that has been thought as a piece of the infrastructure that's being built into crypto, especially in the DeFi space? Like, why isn't there someone building some mechanism to prevent bank runs, essentially?
Because you don't need them.
Well, I don't know. It seems like we kind of needed something.
But so like DeFi is distinct and separate from what was going on here. Like what was going on here was it was basically TradFi with no regulation.
Okay, understand.
It wasn't crypto native. Like so like
I understand.
If you're on Ethereum and you decide, hey, I need to take out a loan, and you want to use Aave or MakerDAO or Compound, one of these protocols, deposit your tokens into a smart contract, and then you're able to borrow at a collateralization ratio, and it's over collateralized. And because liquidations happen on chain and they're incentivized, there are always actors that are looking to liquidate people when the thresholds are met. And protocols have specific mechanisms designed, like MakerDAO has a auction mechanism set up for liquidations. Where the collateral in the vault will get auctioned off, and the liquidator will get a fee for having doing so. And they get the collateral at a discount, which then they can go on the market and just flip that on a DEX and go back to whatever unit of account that they want to hold, right? And they get compensated. So you have this competition of these on-chain keepers, these MEV bots looking to do these types of activities. So from a liquidation perspective, as long as your price oracles are set up correctly, you're never going to run into any kind of bank run, or you're never going to run into an issue of liquidating positions and become insolvent. In terms of a bank run, the problem that you have on chain is that you have native assets like ETH or Bitcoin, and then you have things like stablecoins. Some stablecoins are fiat backed, and some are backed by multi-collateral, like ETH, Bitcoin, and stablecoins, and then some are just backed by ETH. And you have different trade-offs within here. Like if it's backed by just ETH, then you're not going to be able to just stay at $1. You're going to have a floating peg as a result, and you're going to have to impose some kind of negative interest rate policy.
Yeah.
If you have a stablecoin that's 100% backed by fiat, then you're making the deal to be regulated heavily, right? Like Circle or Tether. If the U.S. government issues, some kind of, or any government issues, some kind of declaration to them legally, right, and says you have to comply with this and freeze XYZ accounts because these people are criminals, they can freeze the Tether coins or USDC coins in your account and you can't use them. They're worthless. Yeah. And so you take on that risk in terms of stable coins on chain, no free lunch. What was your initial question? Because I don't want to get into a tangent here. But I guess what I'm saying is that DeFi functioned just as it should. It's withstood many stress tests all the way back to March 2020 during the COVID crash. And the reason is because you have over collateralized lending, you have incentivized liquidation by keepers on chain, and you have a pretty robust price oracle update system with Chainlink, and then also using Uniswap V3 TWAP oracles. So yeah, you have a pretty sound system overall. So really the regulatory piece needs to focus on the centralized exchanges and the games that they're playing. Yeah. And ultimately, Coinbase had much stricter regulatory practices that they had to follow than FTX. And that's where some of the favoritism, and people are questioning, like, why did Gary Gensler favor FTX and allow them to get away with all this stuff that people knew was going on, and then didn't let Coinbase offer a similar product? Coinbase had a Coinbase Lend product that they were going to offer to retail back last year, where basically they would take your USDC, put it in compound, and at the time rates were about 4%. So it'd be a net positive for retail users, right? But that got nixed. SEC said it was a security, so you couldn't do it. Meanwhile, FTX has, they had their FTX earn, right, paying 5%, on your stable coins.
Which is weird because FTX did have licenses in the US, but for some reason this is a very gray space, right? It's not very clear in terms of regulation. But then it seems that probably Coinbase must have built the team internally themselves to be on purpose compliant as much as possible, probably to avoid something like this, right?
Coinbase has a really long history. Like Kraken, they've been around for multiple cycles. And at the core of it, Brian Armstrong is like a Bitcoin, Ethereum maximalist. Like he very much believes in, the ethos of the space of decentralization, censorship resistance, privacy. It remains to be seen, if that upholds forever, right? We've seen founders kind of lose track of their core values over time, but Sam Bankman-Fried was never that. Right. And his come up story is actually starting to get a lot of, I guess, conspiracy theories around it coming to the light, because his relationship with the CEO of Alameda, who was also his girlfriend, who went to MIT with him, whose dad was in charge of Gary Gensler when Gensler was at MIT. And so there's this and then Bankman-Fried's mom being, heavily involved in California politics and fundraising for the Democratic Party. And then all of a sudden, Bankman-Fried himself is the second largest Democratic donor to, Joe Biden. And then in this last election midterms, he donated $37 million. People are starting to question, what are these insider ties? Where did they come from all of a sudden? Because it happened so quickly and so fast. It's not something that you usually see. And based off of the treatment of people like Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, people are like, what's up with this? It remains to be seen. I don't know. Gossip, hearsay, but there are certainly connections and things there that will probably come out over time.
Yeah. So from your understanding of SBS background, then, it sounds like he has the pedigree. Just maybe again sounds like something like Theranos. You have the pedigree. It's a nice story. It sounds like to me just right place, right time, right pedigree. is like, from your understanding, is he like a true technologist? Like someone like, guys early in the space, maybe
No,
like a Brian Armstrong or such? So he's not.
no. Like the true technologists are like Vitalik Buterin, Gavin Wood. It's funny that I said Gavin Wood. Anatoly Yakovenko, if I'm saying his name wrong, but the founders of all these major blockchain projects. I mean, like they're the true technologists, and like
Yeah.
because crypto is open and permissionless, if you really believe in the technology, you can learn it and you can build it and you can
Yeah.
collaborate with people in an
Yeah.
asynchronous manner, and you don't take the other route because it's just against your values. And so
Yeah.
that's why I don't believe he was a technologist,
Yeah.
at all. I think he was very much he bought into this notion of effective altruism, right?
Yeah.
Maximize profit because I know what's best. I know how to donate capital better than everybody. So
Yeah.
I'm justified in just going
But
for max profit.
but if you look at all of his activities, and okay, so this ties back to the question I asked originally, right? But then, it just seems like this was just all traditional finance, but like where you sit at the intersect of crypto and, I mean, yes, the off ramp, on ramp of fiat, right? So it's going to look very close to fiat. I mean, again, I don't want to probably, like, to play devil's advocate, I don't want to completely disparage the fact that he's not a technologist. Like, you and I are not technologists, but I think we need more high quality critical thinkers in this space. I think you need more diversified talent of different kind of backgrounds. It can't just be pure
I mean,
technologists. So
I I've spent enough time in this space, seeing who the technologists are. Like I could tell you, like honestly, like in every protocol, like I could point him out. He's not a technologist because if he
yeah,
was, he would have built the centralized exchange, making commitments on chain as a Validium
yeah,
on Ethereum, which
mm,
is an option for any centralized exchange that's out there.
yeah,
Like that's what a technologist would do, and that's not him.
yeah. And but I think you would need. So I guess maybe that was the component that was missing, like the true spirit of the technology. But you still need someone who's also like a rah-rah cheerleader, face man, to make those human connections. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you also do need adoption and understanding if you want to go move away from, the fanatics to the early adopters to mass market, right? You do need some type of bridge, and you need people who can sit between worlds. So I mean, in this case, it was just too much over indexing on one. Maybe he had the intentions of kind of doing that, but then he got lost in the weeds, got high on becoming Icarus of sorts, right? But like, and also like, like just like traditional finance, like you can get lost. I mean, we've been in markets for a long time. It's easy to be in the game for the wrong reasons, just purely for greed, or I don't know, just for your ego or these kind of things, right? So it's just like, my original question was like, why was there no, um, central banking mechanisms built in these exchanges? But like, it's like, as you pointed out in a longer explanation, essentially it's the wrong way to think about it, because this is more of the traditional finance space, right? It's more of an exchange, which then it seems for now, at least on paper, that like the Coinbase approach probably would have been the better approach, right? Like be more conservative, try to work with regulators, make sure you're getting approved, because you're sitting at that intersect. So it's not like my framing is probably wrong in that I'm trying to smash modern fiat into crypto, but that's not the point of crypto, right? And I think that's what you were trying
So
to say
I would,
essentially.
yeah, the way like a good mental model I think is that like if you like centralized exchange is in the middle. To the right of it is TradFi. To the left of it is
Right.
DeFi, and
Yeah.
you don't really need the centralized exchange outside of its on off ramp function. And obviously, there's a business opportunity there, right? So somebody is going
Correct.
to go for
It's
that and solve that problem.
trading.
And if they can
Yeah.
provide, vertical, scaling to their customers or vertical solutions, right? They're going to go ahead and do that, rather than let you go on chain, so easy.
Yeah.
But in reality, on-chain transactions are just built better for transparency, for safety.
Yeah.
Well, you could argue with me on safety, but generally they're built better for transparency and security properties than centralized exchanges are. Because ultimately you are trusting an intermediary
Yes.
And crypto is, the ethos is, verify, don't trust. Or some people would say trust but verify, and that's the whole point of being able to run a node, is that you're able to independently validate that, the chain that you're linking up to is the canonical correct chain. And so if you're going to go ahead and send your transaction, then you're confident that you're not, following somebody else's fork, or, you've been hacked, etc.
So it seems like a good mental model is to identify where that kind of ethos is missing in the culture, like, the right talent behind the organization. And then that could be reflected by looking onto the actual, actions, the balance sheet, how things are built from a technology infrastructure standpoint. And, I'm sure then that probably means, like, if we were to use this as a road, like, as like a, I don't know, compass, we could probably point to a lot of other exchanges or other institutions or, organizations that are probably not very stable either, and probably prone to more systemic spread, right?
So I'll give you an anecdote, and I think it will be a good reference point. So
yeah,
if you're ever around people from the Ethereum Foundation, and they're in a group together, it would be taboo to talk about price. You're not allowed to talk about price. It's like first rule of Fight Club: don't talk about Fight Club. The technologists don't talk about the markets or price.
Yeah.
And that's the divergence. And so people like SBF or a Do Kwon, who have some technological know-how and skill. Actually, Do Kwon was the first, launched the first blockchain in the Cosmos ecosystem that used a version of WASM. I think they used WASMer or WASMD for their virtual machine, where you could write smart contracts in Rust. And that since has been forked by Juno and by some other chains that are, implementing Cosm WASM as a VM, permissions or not, whatever. But the point being is, that was the first one within the Cosmos ecosystem that was doing WASM smart contracts. And they're also their UX, like with Terra Station, with the way that their UI as well on things like Astroport, top notch. Anchor, all looked like great. But you had another component there that wasn't just let's build the best product possible. It was no, let's enrich me and get me as much influence and grow as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And so the ethos of the crypto space is to abstract away that financial piece. So that's what I mean. The true technologists really aren't considering that, which is much different than what you see in the Web 2 founder technologist model like Elon. Yes, he is super focused on the details, but at the same time, he is also paying attention to the markets. I mean, that's just
Well, that you can't escape that.
Sailor is another one. If you right, he started with MicroStrategy, right? Software as a service.
Yeah.
But then eventually just became this diehard Bitcoin maxi, focused on his balance sheet management. As a basically as a treasury allocator, right?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit different, and the problem that TradFi is having is it's having that issue of meeting crypto at that right point.
Correct.
And centralized exchanges aren't quite it. You actually have to go a little bit further. What Coinbase is doing is they're trying to go a bit further, and so they're trying to make it as easy as possible to self-custody your own funds. They have a great UX in their Coinbase self-custody wallet. They have MPC wallets that are coming soon. They have an on-ramp to Solana, to Avalanche, which is a shit chain, to Ethereum, and then also to Ethereum rollups, Optimism. And so, and then also not a rollup, but a sidechain, Polygon. And so you're able as a user now to, self-custody your assets on all these, I would say, higher quality chains with more security. And they're trying to make it as easy as possible. I think that's fantastic. And I think they're going to continue to build that way. And I think ultimately they'll start to meet crypto a little bit closer to where it needs to be. But I think I think Binance, probably the same thing. Like if CZ continues to lead the company in the way that he's going, probably be similar. But what FTX was trying to do was put their stake in the ground and say, no, like we're the gateway to crypto. Everything runs through us. We know best. Like customers should just stay with us, use our payments app, clear with us, not go on chain.
I mean, like my take on what you're saying is that I think, at least for crypto, we're still so early along the adoption phase, is that where you still do need more technologists to build the infrastructure, right? And like it's like building your first layer of internet. And at the point where the technology gets better and better, it's when you want to start layering the other kind of talent and people to get involved, then to kind of make it more widespread. But it seems like we're trying to jump ahead with too much money in general, which again, like I still think from VC to any other, space of, early stage investing or industries, is that there's just too much money from QE. And this is just another effect. And I think the current recession is just that too, right? Just as an asset class and all these people getting too much money and overvaluations and this kind of stuff, right? So I think that's the same problem, but it's
100%.
I think so I think that like if we were to think about this of how the space should unfold, is you want more technology still, and there's still not even enough of that to power where the infrastructure, or even on a product level, where it should be. And one interesting thing that my friend was telling me on Friday was that actually FTX as a product was really good from a trading standpoint. Like there was no latency loss, like no slippage, nothing. But I think where if you go into Binance at number one, like you still have all sorts of product problems. So it wasn't so much like the product was bad, or maybe, I don't know about technology wise, but maybe from a product user standpoint, it was actually, it was good. Everyone was recommending it, right? But then, for other ones that are number one, not as good experience, right? But maybe technology better, but I can't say.
I don't know, man. Like the traders on CT are like, fuck FTX. Like the execution sucks.
Oh, is it really?
My execution, so Alameda can front run me. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that would probably depend on who you ask. I never used FTX, so I can't.
Yeah.
I can't speak to it. Yeah, I would say probably we're about 10 years away from being able to build on top of crypto like you would build on top of Web 2 today. Zero knowledge proofs are going to change the industry. They're going to change a lot of things. Basically, you can prove something without revealing what that something is. So this will inherently lead to more privacy preserving protocols, less information leaking. And for things like DeFi, that's really important because like right now, basically like your wallet is like your Twitter account. You can just say, oh, here's my address and go look and see what my financial history is, which nobody can do that with a bank account today. And that's kind of where you want to get to with accounts. Things like account abstraction are really interesting. So it's a bit of a more technical topic, but like on Ethereum, you have two types of accounts. You have a smart contract account and you have what's known as an externally owned account. Externally owned accounts are the only accounts that can initiate transactions. And so as a result of this, you need to have an externally owned account as a wallet. But this leads to the notion of like having to store, a 12 to 24 seed phrase. And also too, then if you lose your keys, you're screwed. Like there is no do-overs and go-backs. If you have a smart contract, basically it's like having a vault where you store the keys in your vault, and then you can recover the vault socially by having, like, let's say 2 or 3 people be signers for that vault. So like you, me, and I don't know, you, me, and Joe could have a vault, and then if I lose my keys, right, you and Joe could help me get my keys back and get access back to the vault. Also, too, like the way you execute transactions on chain, like with an EOA, you have to first sign approval, then send the transaction, make a second call. Sometimes, depending on the operation, if you're yield farming for the first time with new tokens, you might have to make like 4 or 5 approvals before actually going to the transaction where you're depositing tokens into the LP. And that's a real pain in the butt. And with things like a smart contract wallet with account abstraction, you're able to bundle all those transactions into one user-oriented intent. and execute them atomically. And you also then don't need any ETH in your wallet, because as long as you have any kind of funds in your wallet, the paymaster or the relayer can then just say, okay, like I'll pay the ETH for the transaction, and I'll keep a percentage of your tokens. And today, if you want to get any transaction executed on I'd say 99% of blockchains, you have to have the native token in order to process the transaction. And sometimes acquiring the native token can be a pain in the butt, because a centralized exchange in your jurisdiction might not have that token. You might not know anybody that has that token. There might not be like some general public faucet. So then you got to ask people, hey, can you send me a little bit of, token, in order I can set up my account, and then, you can pay them back. But this also limits that problem. So account abstraction is something that's been worked on Ethereum for quite some time, many years, but it's still probably, I would say, 2 to 3 years away, because there's a lot of other things on the roadmap that are equally of importance. And so, like, from a UX perspective, you're just not going to get that improvement for a little while. And then also too, with scalability, like today, anybody can use Ethereum and pay a decent fee, but in a bull market, you're looking at like, $20 to $30 to do a simple trade on Uniswap, which isn't great from a UX perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of what has been going on is working on, how do we scale the chain, and, how do we scale execution through having, these other chains settle on top of us called rollups, and outsource the execution. And so that's being worked on, and it's going to be time. You also have people coming up with new solutions every day. Like, there are academics that are entering the space that have been working on distributed systems and peer-to-peer wireless communication that, 3 years ago started working on crypto, and now are coming up with brilliant ideas on ways to implement new things. And, one being like a shared security methodology. And so there's going to be more of that. There's a ton of cryptographers already in the space, but I think more cryptographers will enter the space. There's a very small amount of economists in the space, but actually it's like perfect breeding ground for economists, because you can study, a macroeconomy, like
everything's on chain
life cycle in 6 months.
Yeah, everything that's happening, literally, right? There's no question of having weird mathematical abstraction on social human being behaviors. You could actually literally see the behavior by consequence on every transaction, right? So wait, hold on. So I think, so I'm going to take a stab at trying to understand the abstraction from what you said. So I think there's two things. One thing is ultimately what you're saying. I'm going to guess that if you are going to continue in this space, and if you're long term, it's pretty much a huge infrastructure play, and that's very nuanced, because I think directionally people kind of know the right direction, but we don't know the exact solution, and everyone's kind of working towards that, right? So if you're investing, or if you're building, or you want to be a part of this future where this really does disintermediate, like you told me, like this intermediates actual financial institutions, we're still like a few decades out probably to see something mature. Like, I mean, maybe somewhere along we hit the J curve and it can accelerate faster within the 10 years. Maybe it's faster. But I mean, like you said, it's 10 years, 20 years, maybe 15 years out, right? So that's the first thing. It's like, it's very infrastructure driven. If you're looking at the future, like, I guess if you want to be involved, at least you have to have the understanding of that component. You can't just abstract away everything and like, oh, we're building applications, and you can't like throw away the ethos and the technology guys that are part of this, because that's actually what this whole point of it at the end of the day. The second thing is, if I'm to understand what you're saying, is everything you just talked about with, what's that called again? The account
abstraction.
Yeah, account abstraction. At scale, and I don't know if there's any other use cases. Are you telling me, does that make centralized exchanges obsolete then?
It's not going to make them obsolete until you have, like, so I guess what I alluded to earlier when we were talking was there's a way to build a centralized exchange that post commitments of their transactions on chain.
Yeah.
And so you can have an off-chain order book, match orders, and then post a commitment and say, okay, this is the new state update of these accounts based off of these orders, and this is what these accounts did. Compress that information into a proof, post a proof of that to Ethereum, send the data to what's called the data availability committee or another blockchain that will take care of data availability, or you can pay a little bit more and put that on Ethereum as well. And it's a way then for people to have confidence in the integrity of the computation that's been done, and with regards to their trades.
But that doesn't have to go on an exchange, though, right?
What's that?
That doesn't have to happen on an exchange, though, correct?
No. This would be a way to like have a hybrid decentralized centralized exchange where you're posting commitments of what you're doing on chain so they can be tracked in real time and verified. Because ultimately that's the issue here, is that you're just putting your money in a black box and you don't really know what's going on, versus if you put your money on chain, even if you get hacked, let's just say because you were stupid and like you entered your seed phrase into a website. But
but people know,
But like at least you can say, okay, like it was on me, I did it, was my fault. That feels a lot better than oh my God, like I trusted these guys not to lose my money and they lost my money. That feeling is horrible.
What happened.
The other issue that you have in crypto, which is kind of orthogonal to all this, and I think maybe this is like, I think, a much richer conversation, and it has to deal with human greed. And unfortunately in crypto, there is this very strong magnetic pull to these dear leader types, whether it's a Trump or Hitler. In our space, it could be like Suzu, it could be Do Kwon, Richard Hart, you name it. Like, and it was SBF. There's this saying on crypto Twitter, don't become the main character. That's how you, right? And all these main character types pop up, and they're able to get all these suckers to believe them, and not even like people that are just like suckers as in like retail plebes, but like actual VCs in the space that are supposed to know what they're doing, that have a track record of pretty good legitimacy getting involved with these people, clearly not have done enough due diligence. And it's just unfortunate because apparently, if you look at history, like this has happened cycle after cycle after cycle. And touching back on like why is this possible, and touching back on something you said earlier, which is that crypto really isn't ready for the size of investment that it's getting. But because with tokenization, you can get instant liquidity, unlike anywhere else in financial markets, like that's the incentive for people. It's, if you're a builder, it's, well, I can just build this project, get some seed round from a couple VCs, raise a Series A or Series B, print my token, I get some exit. Even if I can only exit 10% of my allocation, I probably like 100x my net worth already. In 6 months, if it fails, I'm out. And you saw that a lot during the bull market. And you saw a lot of VCs, even legitimate ones, use that type of strategy. And it really hurt the space. And it's unfortunate because all these infrastructure projects that you and I are talking about actually need more funding and more research and more development. And we could be a lot further along if we weren't misallocating capital like we are. Like that's the tragedy, I think, of like what this whole blow up speaks to.
Yeah, my friend was, I don't know what the tweet was that he was sending me, but it was something along the lines yesterday. He was sending me along that like, it was a joke, but like it's a joke that it's a conspiracy that the Fed sent SBF to the crypto world to destroy the industry. So, which is like essentially this could really put a huge freeze on like you said, what you just described. Like if there's a big fallout tied with a recession, that's just going to slow down the acceleration possibly. I think for the people who already dug in, that's not going to change those people. But in terms of talent, which is very important, in terms of funding, which is very important to keep building that infrastructure, that could have long-term effects where it just and then like I said in the last sessions that this talent will be competing with other exciting spaces too. Then right, so
you're 100% right.
Yeah.
The biggest issue that you're facing with crypto talent in terms of development is the combination of full stack and front end. Like Coinbase, for instance, they hire a lot of Web 2 legacy people and like Goldman Sachs people. Like they don't hire crypto native people that often. The reason being is they're much more focused on that UI, UX piece, and also the sales piece for institutional, right? But like a typical crypto protocol, like I don't know if you've ever used Curve Finance, but like Curve was set up with an interface like literally from 1993, like intentionally. And for
Yeah, yeah.
crypto natives, it's fun, but for like anybody else, it's like, oh my
No,
God,
it's
how the
not.
fuck do I use this
Yeah,
thing? This is,
correct, correct.
and that's where a lot of the Web2 talent, when they come next bull cycle, will be able to layer in and help
Correct.
because it, they're experts at this. Right?
Yeah.
The other thing that's very helpful that's underrated, but I think will become more obvious is that Apple just switched from C++ to Rust as their core
Oh,
language.
interesting.
And Rust is something that's extremely popular in crypto because number one, you can compile Rust down into WASM or a lower level virtual machine, which is compatible with Web2 stuff even today.
Yeah.
And so that's very attractive. Also, Rust comes with what's called Cargo, which is this basically this testing tooling suite built into it.
Yeah.
And no other language really has that, as far as I understand. That's another reason. And people love it. It's got this huge community and network effect that's growing. And Solana is primarily in Rust. Near you can write in Rust. The Cosmos chains are now for their smart contracting chains going to be having Rust. Everything in Ethereum is not Rust, but I could totally see in the future there being a roll up or something that has Rust as an option, where you can compile down into still into EVM bytecode in some way. Actually, Fuel is not Rust, but it's a hybrid between Rust and Solidity. But the point being is like I see that as a major like it's an easy pathway for a Web2 person to go, well, I already have these skills. Like I don't really need to learn a core competency. I just need to learn about the industry and like how to apply my skills. And I think that's like going to be a huge bridge for getting these Web2 front end full stack developer types like into the industry and really getting the UX to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Let me take so on my last discussion in crypto on Friday, there was one line of thought where like if this is really truly bad for the industry and it does set it back, or you don't get as much funding or talent going into it, and if say regulation is now looking at this like there's a huge target on the back of crypto, so my friend thinks that it may fracture the crypto world, right? Where one has to go deeper into the shadows, and then there's going to be one line of crypto with like central bank digital currencies and some type of integration. Do you see this splintering? Because regulation can't regulate all of crypto. It's impossible because it's supposed to be decentralized, right? So, but it's like if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's more positive and more collaborative into the future, where you think there can be these bridges and the technology will be able to work with some type of intermediate of regulation, infrastructure, and the actual ethos of crypto. So do you see it as actually in the next 10 years evolving towards coming together or splitting? And like, what's the credence in either?
It's a good question. Definitely don't want to be a LARP and say I know, but like I could see a multitude of possibilities on that axis.
Yeah.
Like I think you're reading me right in terms of what my hopes are.
Yeah.
I'm very skeptical because of what I've seen from TradFi's interaction with crypto. They basically think it's just a casino that needs to be regulated and gifted to them. They don't really see the value proposition. And so that's problematic. And like actually with a lot of my research at EY, like that was my hope, is that I can publish some stuff and help educate some people on the nuances and get them to think, through some of these details a little bit more. But yeah, that's the scalability piece is just not there yet for any blockchain really, to absorb the amount of capital and the like Visa level transactions, right? 10,000 transactions per second. Not like inter protocol voting transactions like on Solana, but like actual real transactions. We're just not there yet. We will be there. So that's like, I think that's a huge hindrance, number one. In terms of the regulatory front, I think a lot of it will depend on the regimes. If you look in the United States, the Republican regime has been extremely more sympathetic to crypto. In fact, the House Financial Services Committee is going to shuffle in a way because of this election that's going to be much more favorable to crypto. Bitcoin is something that some US politicians have already adopted as like, I'm going to wrap myself in Bitcoin, Ted Cruz being one of them. And so as a result of this, like, I think you will see more favorable regulation in the US. And why? Because you have this notion of free markets, right? And historically, Republicans have always favored free market solutions and less regulation.
That's just weird, because that's one of the only few things that remain true in the party probably then. Like, everything else is just diverged, but like, that's actually quite surprising to hear. Like, oh, so there actually is something substantial from like their actual philosophy from the past carrying forward in terms of,
being sympathetic. Yeah. In Europe, it's more of on a set track. They have this, I don't remember what the acronym is called, MICA, and now they have this MICA 2 that they're pushing. And basically, they want to approve who can issue stablecoins. They want to KYC any transaction that you do on chain that's of any value over like, $1,000 or something. They want full KYC and control of everything. And I think that's actually more dangerous. And because they're on this stable path versus in the US, as you know, we will oscillate between extremes politically very often, right? We'll go from Black Lives Matter to like not caring about anything social justice related. I mean, it's just, it happens. I think that there are going to be other players globally that step up, like Balaji obviously is like always championing India. I think Southeast Asia, Japan actually, strangely enough, because they've invested a lot in learning about crypto already, they have a better regulatory framework from my understanding. They're also facing a population, crisis, and they're starting to relax some of their visa policies already this year.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely see globally an avenue for more favorable crypto domains because you can raise capital from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You can be global with your team. You can be decentralized. And like, as a sovereign, why wouldn't you want, crypto protocols to pay taxes in your jurisdiction? Of course you would want that. That's an easy revenue stream for you.
Yeah.
Like, so I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think that it's possible that the US could lead in sensible regulation. Like, I haven't lost all hope yet. And there's been a huge advocacy group building with a lot of lobbying from traditional VCs like Andreessen Horowitz, but also like Coinbase to Masari, to others in the industry. So I'm not all like on the bear case.
Yeah, you're very hopeful. You're very, well, I mean, it shows that, how deep you've dug in. So I mean, ultimately you do need the optimist. And then, of course, you'll need the pessimist to make it more pragmatic, to make the solutions work. But you kind of need both, right? So
the pessimistic case is that basically all on and off ramps are banned in like the US and Europe. And if you want to get cryptocurrency, you either have to like get paid in crypto directly, mine it, or you have to be in one of these other jurisdictions. And that's, if that happens, then probably what would happen is, and my guess would be, it would probably accelerate a parallel track for the world financial system, actually, because I think that emerging markets, I mean, here's an example. In Argentina, a lot of people use the Binance app. Unfortunately, they're trusting Binance, but they use it because you can send US dollar stable coins to people free of charge. And you can store your wealth in the US dollar, and you don't have to worry about the central bank raising interest rates 67 percentage points.
Things can actually function properly, right?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of places in the world where this is needed. Payments is a huge use case, micropayments, and I could very well see it in a draconian scenario where you do have this bifurcation. And I don't think crypto will die. It would just, to your point, be set back in the developed world for a while. But, like AI
still will grow, though.
and like AI is right there. I mean, like some people
Yeah.
think we're going to see the singularity,
There'll
in
be an intersect.
2029. I,
Yeah.
I think regulators will start fudding AI really hard as it gets more successful and they get scared, and I think crypto will fall to the back burner. I mean, people can't
Yeah.
walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, correct. Well, especially regulators.
Well, people can, yeah, regulators can't.
Yeah, correct, correct. So I mean, like that's very interesting, and if it does
I have a
bifurcate,
perspective.
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say my perspective is I think like I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the personal fulfillment and building towards a better world. And I fully believe that crypto can help improve the world. A lot of people are in it because they're like, well, I just want to make it the next cycle because these coins are going to 100x.
Yeah.
And, like culturally, it's in the culture. You saw in the ICO phase, right, where everybody had an
Yeah.
ICO. It's very difficult to shake. You see it in equities, at Robinhood, Wall Street Bets, like it's there.
It's a feature of the modern financial. I mean, it's well, okay. It's a few things. Like, it's just human nature. Number one. Number two, it's actual economics, actual scarcity, right? And then, of course, that's manifested. And I don't want to get maybe too philosophical, but it really is the root of capitalism ultimately, right? And how we have
Yes.
structured the modern financial system. And I guess in a way, if you think philosophically, like cryptocurrency is that counter to that of that paradigm shift possibly of thinking of a new world in a different kind of way. But ultimately, if you do intersect, like you can't get rid of human nature, right? And there's always going to be, I mean, and it's like I said in the other episode, it's not like speculation is not 100% bad for modern financial markets. It has its role to play as a feature, and I think that just that hasn't. We're not at a point where you can intersect that, like you said, with crypto, right? So it's going to be a
Yeah.
long way off before it makes sense for mass and speculation is controlled and the technology can support it. But I mean, like, what I think what we have to accept is, and maybe the technologists have to accept that, it's like that is going to be a facet that's always going to be there. It's more like how can you manage and build so that it can coexist together. Because if not, we are going to get this bifurcation. We are going to get pockets of
Correct.
the world where it's going to be crypto-led, where you can off-ramp to actually get value into the physical world. Because the whole point ultimately is like, we live in the physical world. I need to use it to get what I want economically, right? I need resources. There's scarcity. I want to get food. I want to get land. I want to enjoy my life. So if that happens, you're going to get crypto world and you're going to get like old institution world, and that's going to be very weird. So ultimately, yeah, I think it is better if it comes together. That's a interesting line of thought, though, I guess.
So this is going to sound like, I think a little bit extreme, but like, I think the product market fit, I think the reason crypto exists is to disintermediate financial institutions, because eventually you'll be able to express every function, every primitive of a financial institution. You're already able to do like 80% of it with very
Yeah.
primitive smart contracts, but like you'll be able to get to 100%. And when you can get to 100% with privacy, there will be no more need for banks.
Yeah.
And like freeing the world of banks, in my opinion, is that's freedom, that's liberation. That allows us to achieve like the utopia AI scenario, because now like we care much more about community. We care much more about maybe like ideas like UBI. Like we care more about helping our neighbors. We're less
Yeah.
playing these PvP meta games all the time with each other.
Yeah.
And yes, like you need that. You need the competition. You need people to want to get paid. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think actually like that's a perk of the way that the system works. But like allowing intermediaries to just step in there, um, and dictate how capital flows, just because now they're entrenched, right? And they have, lots of lobbyists and global connections with world leaders, where they can get policy written for themselves to keep themselves in the game. Um, they're no longer adding value. I mean, like as we talked about oftentimes, right? Like in the financial crisis, banks lost more money than they made in their entire history, like in one crisis, if you added all the losses together. And like there's something wrong there. And with crypto, if you can focus on getting people on board it correctly and not in this gambler mentality, but in this, like, I'm actually taking agency back. I'm taking responsibility back. I'm taking charge of my life. If you can get people to onboard in that way, you start to change their relationship with money, and you start to change the way that people perceive these things, and the power that they have.
Actual action, yeah, correct.
So
wait. So in this kind of utopian world, or like if you can achieve 100% disintermediation, where does that power coalesce, or does the power get distributed across a truly, like, all these truly decentralized nodes across literally every person, or like where like, because
that is the end game.
Doesn't disappear. So that's true. Like, so then it's because it's so hard to imagine a world like that. It's just like, it's something that you don't know what you don't know, right? Right. So like it just seems weird that, like, if you think about how powerful the players in the financial institution are. I mean, power does just typically shift around historically from different forms of civilization or philosophies of how things are run. Like, power still exists. So I'm just kind of wondering, where does, I mean, it's just, it almost seems impossible that power could just be like equalized like that. You know what I mean?
Like, I think, like, thinking about it in terms of just like a convex optimization, right? Like, you want to be at one end of the curve. Like, I think there are a lot of benefits to having these verticalized economies of scale large banks.
Yeah.
And the benefits are that for large corporations, like, they can literally get all of their financial needs taken care of by people that are competing for their services, right?
Right.
And that's what keeps the global economy going. So, like, there are huge benefits to that. But on the flip side, for your average retail user, the experience has become really poor. And
so bad.
right? Globally, this is agreed upon, right?
And globally, everywhere a lot of
people, people can't get bank accounts, right? Like, and then they have to deal with payday lenders, or they have to, like, keep their money, as we talked about, in a currency that's debasing. And so, like, I think it's time to unbundle and try the convex optimization on the other side of the scale. And like, one thing I've learned in crypto about protocol design is, like, usually the best benefits are you either get everything together, like, and have one actor, monolithic, control everything, or break it down into all of its component parts as much as possible, and you allow, like, the division of labor to flourish, basically. And it's a power sharing. Within there, you're going to have fulcrums, right? And so, like, in this worldview, if it's Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, right? Some of these early token holders, right, will have more power in some way, right? Or like the validators that are running the network will have a little bit more say so, right? Like, there will be spots where power will consolidate, and like, maybe like that piece of the trade-off is not great. So I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that we can get to a world where basically everybody has their wallet with their private key on their cell phone, which makes so much sense because you carry your cell phone everywhere, right? It's encrypted in a secure enclave on your phone. You can go log into your wallet immediately. You load up your light client node, which connects to the blockchain, validates the last X amount of block headers to sync you onto the chain. You're connected. You send your transaction. Get it back within a second. You got confirmation. Coins are back in your account. You're good to go. I mean, I think that's the end game. That's the goal. And if we can get there, and you really never need a bank again. But I think that's hard. Like the CBDC thing, like China's very much going that approach. The British government is very interested in CBDCs, ironically.
Central bank digital currencies.
I think Circle in the US with USD Coin is kind of like the de facto private market solution for a central bank digital currency, and I hope it stays that way. It's one of the reasons I'm against CBDCs. Like, I think giving like a central bank, direct access to billions of consumer bank accounts is really a bad idea. It's really bad for privacy. It's really bad for security. I mean, the U.S. government has shown, for instance, that they're not very good at security. They've been hacked how many times? data leaks in the last couple of years. So yeah, I mean, it's a stretch. It's going to be a battle.
Oh yeah, huge hurdles.
Snowden is still not a U.S. citizen, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Or he's not back in the U.S. I don't know what his citizenship status is, but like I guess like that's just like just an anecdote to say that like we're not at a point yet socially like where things like privacy, agency, freedom, self-sovereignty are values that people really care about yet.
Yeah, they don't care until it affects them. That's the problem. So you just want to abstract it away. But that's just human nature again, right? So and like I think to reach where you want to go, like say, I mean, worst case, you're somewhere in the middle of that vision, which is not terribly bad because you have options in the world then, right? But we're talking about yeah, like we're talking about trying to fight with people who will not want to let go of that power. I mean, like there is a big conflict of interest for these, modern fiat institutions, financial institutions to not adopt this. It's taking their lunch, right? So and then at the same time, if you really want to have widespread acceptance, you kind of do need a dear leader to bridge the two worlds then, right? Because that's just how humans are. I mean, unless you're telling me like technology is so powerful that product just does everything. Not usually the case, right? Like you kind of need some type of figure, like a Musk figure, to like, people come follow me to the great promised land. And so I mean it's hard. These are hurdles, right? And along those ways, people get corrupted and the powers will want to fight you, right? So yeah, it's interesting. But I mean I think what I like is that we kind of laid it on the table and then we can kind of follow where that goes. Because this is not going away anytime soon, and I think you're right, man. It holds a lot more promise than I realized because I'm not in this space. So it's just like it's good to hear that what potential it is, and we kind of need that, and we need more people telling the stories. We need more people being on the mainstream channels. We need more media, like more movies, TV shows, probably showing the promise, right? Like it's just kind of like the whole Peter Thiel thing of the four quadrants of different countries, right? You have like people who are indefinitely pessimistic, where like China used to be, where they would just copy everything. America is like indefinitely optimist, where free money forever, and then but now we have to go back to the spectrum where we have to be definitely optimist, where we have to manifest the future, plan for the future, and build the future. And I think the turmoil we're seeing in the world now, like all the pain and all the strife between infighting political parties, ideologies, it's just a manifestation of the pain. And it's because we're going through a transition, I think, ultimately. And hopefully these technologies can help us transition into a better world. But that being said, the transitions are always painful, historically speaking, right? So I don't know. Any final thoughts? I don't want to keep you from your dinner. So, I mean, we could always continue the conversation for sure in the future, but maybe we could wrap up anything that you have any insights from our discussion.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think the FTX thing is really unfortunate, and I think it's not really representative of what crypto is. And I hope, I guess, is that we can have better products and less scammers as we go into the next economic cycle, which is only going to be like 18 months away. And like if we can not sell ourselves out, right, and go crazy over Ponzi coins and NFTs and like corporate sponsorships and metaverse bullshit and different grifters entering the space, like we'll be in a more sustainable place. And I think every cycle as the technology matures will become more sustainable over time. And I think actually eventually when we get to like 2035, we'll probably have a period of like a great moderation where you're done with a lot of these economic haywire cycles and you have a lot more stability. And the technology is done improving, at least for a long time. Until something else replaces it, I think it will be like TCP IP, just continue to, run. So I would encourage anybody to, take control of their own funds, even if it's like a small portion, like go on chain, set up a Gnosis safe wallet, set up an Argent wallet, At worst case, set up a MetaMask wallet, EOA. Just interact with some protocols, see what it's like. Gas is really cheap right now. And you get kind of like a sense of, you just get more of a sense of the space. Like you'll just have a better intuition about it than, just reading about it through various media or social media, etc. But yeah, definitely really fun. I'm sure I said a lot of stupid stuff, but
hey, we're all just monkeys, clapping our hands together. So
this is true.
Yeah,
I like that better than being a rat trapped in a prime number maze.
Oh yeah, well yeah, hopefully that's true. But another discussion for another day. So how can we follow you, or where would you like to point people? If they want to get in contact, or if read your works, or
Sure.
Get in touch.
Yeah, just check out my LinkedIn.
Okay, I'll pop it up.
I have a lot of writing on there. I'll continue different thoughts. And then if you need to reach out to me, the LinkedIn DM is fine.
Is there any way we can convince you to get back on a public persona Substack so we could see some writings?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually working on something. I do have a Substack, a new one that I'm getting ready to launch soon. So
okay,
I'll certainly let you know.
Yeah, let me know. And then, of course, hopefully when your EY publications come out, we could also read some of your more technical works for actual proper institution and research. So I guess there's a lot to look forward to. And I, thank you for your time today, Patrick. I really appreciate your insights. It means a lot.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Okay. Thanks, man. Bye.
Bye.